Hello, this is a recording of a live session from Spark 2021. We hope you enjoy it.
Hello and welcome back to Spark 2021. I'm delighted to introduce Romy Rawlings, Commercial Director at Vestra, who's going to talk to us about sustainability and potentially challenge the notion of what sustainability means. Over to you, Romy.
Thanks very much. Thank you for joining again and welcome again to those of you who were in the last session. I hope this will, as Bronwyn said, just set up a few challenges really. I want to talk about sustainability as far as our business is concerned and the way we approach business from a sort of commercial standpoint, but also a social one. And I think some of it will be possibly new to people. I'm not talking solely about the environmental aspects, which is often what's dwelt on in these sorts of conversations. So I've just got a few points that I'll cover here. And please do add questions to the chat or the Q&A. If we don't get a chance now to answer them, I will be able to through the app. So I'll just start us off quickly with an introduction to our company. And I won't dwell on this, as I say, because this is the less important part of the presentation. But Vestra was started 74 years ago now, I think, when our CEO's grandfather set up a very small mechanical engineering works in an ex-German military hut on the west coast of Norway, straight after the end of World War II. And it was then, and it still is, a family-owned business. And after 5 years occupation, Norway was really rebuilding itself. It had been absolutely devastated. And the Prime Minister at the time stated that increased production would solve all of Norway's financial and material problems. So it was a matter of getting back down to work, and the country was going to be rebuilt. It's very different to the country it is now, which is, as many of you I'm sure know, pretty wealthy. And so everybody cracked on. Initiative and enterprise blossomed everywhere. And the company is still based on the same values and not quite in the same area, but still very much Norwegian. And since that time, we've grown into one of Europe's most successful outdoor furniture brands and supply to projects globally. We'd love to supply to Leamington and Warwick and Stratford and anywhere else, but that's by the by. But it's not really about the furniture for us. It's about the effect that that furniture has on people. And again, as in the last session, I want to bring this back to people. We want to bring people together, to bring trust and cohesion back to society, which is sadly lacking in many places. To let those people meet, to share ideas, life experiences, get to know each other. And it's very much a Scandinavian approach, but we call it everyday democracy. And it's the best tool to avoid this polarization of them and us in our society. So we don't only export Nordic design, but also Nordic values and ideas. And it started very simply with my CEO's grandfather, with these small mechanical products, playground equipment, railings, exercise machines, even an automated fish cake machine, which in Norway was very important at the time, and park benches. And in the 50s, towns looked quite different to what they do today, but there was obviously still the same need for people to meet in these places. And now these are the sorts of projects that we supply to over 70 years later. This is Aker Brygge. This is a harbourside development in central Oslo, really attractive, really thriving. And we've become now one of Europe's most successful producers of outdoor furniture, as I mentioned before. So these are the sorts of products that we manufacture. We have a very extensive product catalogue across many types of furniture, if you're wondering what on earth outdoor furniture or street furniture is. So these are the sorts of things that you see on the street. but you probably pass by every day: seating, litter bins, cycle parking, planters, and those sorts of items. So in terms of sustainability, where is it all going wrong? I'm sure we've all got our own ideas. Well, the things that drive us, and I've mentioned some of these in my previous presentation, so I won't go into great detail. But first of all, our population is growing. And as I mentioned before, more and more people migrating across national borders. And the UN estimates that we will be around 9 billion people on the planet by 2050. I think we're around 7-ish now. And only 50 years ago, we were just 2.5 billion people. So it's a huge increase, as you can see. And with that comes increased diversity, with people moving around, sharing space and resources much more closely. And that brings about its own issues. So we can't comment on how liberal or restrictive a country's immigration policy is. That's a matter of politics. But we also can't ignore the fact that we're living in a more diverse society than ever before. And we need to try and eliminate prejudice. And the best way we believe to do that is allow people to meet, as I've said, share experiences, life stories, food, ideas, get to know each other. And that's how we create a sense of community and belonging in our outdoor spaces and places, as we were all talking in the last session. So our vision is to create arenas for everyday democracy, where caring social meeting places bring people together across age, gender, cultural and economic backgrounds. And we're passionate about making urban spaces open and inclusive for everyone. And this is a shot from Oslo. And in a few years from now, as I mentioned again before, according to the United Nations, 70% of the world's population are going to be living in urban areas. And we're going to be crammed together, forced to share space more and more. And the governments in many countries try and make these places safer with more cameras and adopting hostile architecture. And it's a completely false sense of security that brings. We want to see safe cities that are more like this. This is the High Line in New York. Cities with people in the streets during the day and night. That provides real security, not cameras. And we also need green lungs, open and democratic parks and urban spaces that are socially inclusive. It's becoming more and more important as time goes on, because our cities are, again, for the people who live in them, not the other way around. And of course, what I'll focus on to a greater extent is we're facing this catastrophe of a man-made climate and resource crisis. And it's not too late to do something about it, but it is becoming truly urgent. So a little bit of background on the areas that we talk about in our business and how we like to approach things slightly differently, maybe. Many years ago, Milton Friedman wrote an article in the New York Times, and he stated that the only social responsibility is to increase profits, and that those who think otherwise are puppets of intellectual forces that undermine the basis of a free society. They're strong words, and Milton Friedman wasn't just anybody. He won a Nobel Prize in economics. And for many years, his views have been dominant amongst many business people. And we believe that's probably why the richest people in the world are getting ever richer, while 800 million people live in extreme poverty. It's also the reason probably why we're facing this current climate crisis, because short-term profit has been more important than anything else. But is this morally right in 2021? We don't think so. And many people today, in terms of sustainability, talk about a triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And at Vestra, we put it very simply: everyone can save the world a little. And many people believe that we're a bit naive to believe that we can save the world through street furniture. But the point is that nobody can do everything, but all of us can do something. So when we're talking about sustainability, we always consider these three pillars: social, environmental, and economic, and seek a balance of the three. And we've reached this point right now. I mean, please bear in mind this headline is scary, but it's actually scarier because this was published in 2018. So we don't have 12 years left now to act to limit climate change. And you'll see this everywhere. You'll see these dire predictions and wildfires in Australia last year or the year before, droughts, flooding everywhere in this country, elsewhere globally. These are the sorts of things that we're trying to address. And if you haven't seen this before, Earth Overshoot Day is quite an interesting concept and behind our approach to the way we manufacture, which is to minimize our use of resources. And it's an illustrative calendar date on which humanity's resource consumption for the year exceeds the Earth's capacity to regenerate those resources in that year. And last year, for the first time ever, was several weeks later than 2019. It was August the 22nd. And the only reason for that last year was the coronavirus pandemic. It basically brought the world to a standstill. Prior to that, you can see that this date by which we are in an overdraft situation, if you like, which it should be the 31st of December, ideally, it's been shifting earlier and earlier into July, actually, in 2019. So in other words, we're using at the moment 1.6 times more resources than natural ecosystems can regenerate. So that in itself is totally unsustainable and can't continue. So one of the ways we conduct business is that we've adopted the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals into our strategy. And we did that several years ago. And these goals were adopted by all United Nations member states back in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. So we've got less than 10 years to act. And to be quite honest, it's not going all that well. If you want to look into this, again, the sort of dire predictions continue. And we've had 5 years of not very much happening realistically. And the 17 SDGs are integrated, so they recognise that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development again must balance social, economic and environmental sustainability in every aspect. So it's our aim to be recognised as the most sustainable furniture brand globally, and we're well on the way to that. And as I mentioned, we've adopted 9 of the 17 into our business strategy, and we believe firmly that every business, no matter how small or large they are, can contribute to a slightly better world. And again, we can't all do everything, but everyone can do something. So I'll talk about some of these areas and just give you an idea of the ways we support true sustainability. And some of them are probably a bit more surprising because it's not all about solar panels. And we operate many internal projects, but we also contribute to several external projects in different countries. And we donate 10% of our profits every year to these. And there's an interesting statistic. If all Norwegian businesses had done the same as us, the Norwegian business sector, which is very wealthy, would have matched the entire Norwegian public foreign aid budget twice over. So here are a few examples of what we do, and we encourage others to do the same. So we believe that knowledge conquers all obstacles, but still 60 million children globally have no education. And that's why we support UNICEF by giving 3,500 children living in conflict areas the opportunity to go to school. And some of it is about solar panels, because actually we only use 100% renewable energy sources in all areas of our production. And our production is only carried out in Norway and Sweden for this reason, because we can use 100% renewable. And in Norway, it's from mostly clean hydroelectric power, but we've also covered our factory roof, which is this photo, in Sweden, in photovoltaic panels. And these already produce enough solar power to be completely energy sufficient on sunny days. And bear in mind, this is mid-south of Sweden. You know, this isn't Spain or anywhere where you think the sun shines a great deal. It's still working even in places like that. And by 2025, we should be generating enough renewable energy for all of our own needs, plus another 20% to return to the grid. And that's our contribution to increasing the global output of renewable energy that will be available to others. And this is another maybe surprising sustainable project. We impose very stringent requirements on all our subcontractors in terms of human rights and working conditions. And SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, is very important to us. We've teamed up with Norway's Church City mission in Oslo to offer in-work training for people who are unable to find regular work because of their employment history, and their CVs might have a few gaps. So we employed these 3 guys, gave them bicycles, and they travel around Oslo, where we have a lot of furniture, mending it, re-oiling it, fixing bits and pieces, touching it up. So it's great for the city, it's great for us, and it's great for them. And as they move on, we will take on other people and give them those same opportunities. And we also offer microcredit facilities and knowledge transfers to people in developing countries to give more people the opportunity to start their own businesses there, just like our CEO's grandfather did 74 years ago. We're very excited and continue to be excited about the Tesla Semi that we ordered, I think, 3 years ago, but we're still waiting for it to be delivered. But it's the world's first all-electric articulated truck, and we will use it to produce zero emissions in transport within our own manufacturing network. We're already using the latest generation of biofuel, but this will be completely clean with a range up to 800 kilometers. And bear in mind, when we talk about electric vehicles and charging, we're charging with 100% renewable energy, not like here in this country, which is slightly further back from that. And to reduce health inequalities around the world, we work with Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, to fund a field operating theatre which is capable of treating 700 people a year, with a particular focus on children and women's health. And we promote the Nordic welfare value wherever we can, here in the UK, where we work in the US, throughout Scandinavia, obviously, and anywhere else that we operate, because we believe that's the right thing to do. And as I've said, with more than 70% of the world's population soon to be living in urban areas, in partnership with the Young Sustainable Impact, we're exploring how large cities can become more energy efficient. So for instance, we recently launched litter bins with intelligent sensors that tell an operator when they need to be emptied through an app on their phone. And that means they're not driving around checking bins that don't need emptying, wasting resources. And it improves air quality in towns and cities, but also reduces obviously greenhouse gas emissions. So it contributes to much better conditions in cities, dense cities, particularly like London, for citizens. And as I mentioned with Earth Overshoot Day, through our Vision Zero, we don't make now a single product that isn't intended to last forever. We call it Vestra Vision Zero, but it's truly the circular economy. So if proper use and maintenance is carried out, everything we produce can have an eternal life. We'll take furniture back and restore it after many years of use. We can replace the timber. We can repaint it a different color, and that's all saving about 70% of resources. We're not throwing anything away and selling new to our customers. So because we have extremely lengthy warranties and we take no shortcuts in our production, we can do this, and our products essentially have no expiration date. And this is what we have to focus wherever you're working, not just on our things, but built-in obsolescence, the days of throwing a kettle out after 2 years or building in obsolescence into our cars. We have to stop. We have to rethink the way our economy thrives on this throwaway society. So we've been carbon neutral as a business since 2010, over 10 years now, and we consistently work to reduce our negative footprint and increase our positive footprint through all of these actions that I've described. And we continue to do so. We're about to build a very exciting brand new factory in Norway that will reduce our use of resources by about 90% in some areas. And that's the only way we can carry on with these continuous improvements. We've kind of hit a plateau in everywhere else that we act without investing in something very new like that. And protecting nature, we choose not to use tropical hardwoods for any of our products. It's very, very common in outdoor seating to see Iroko or Ipe or all sorts of different tropical timbers from the rainforest, and we elect not to use any of those for ethical reasons, whether they're warranted through Forestry Stewardship Council or not. We just don't believe it's the right thing to do. So we choose timber only from Scandinavian forests. They're some of the most sustainable in the world, and biodiversity there is as important as crop quality, and tree numbers are increasing every year, so it's certainly not an issue with deforestation at all. So it's a bit gloomy. I apologize for that. I mean, it's never easy watching some of these statistics, but is there still hope? We believe there is. And if I just sort of talk you through some of the comments that my CEO has made, then, you know, I think you'll see that there is an opportunity for businesses to act differently and conduct themselves in a better way. And we're very keen to lead the way. With really typically Scandinavian transparency, we don't keep any trade secrets. We're very keen to show others that we can do better. All of us can do better. Our new factory is going to be a sort of learning resource. So we're very keen to show people how they can adopt the same green economy, if you like. And we encourage everybody individually and in business to take a really long-term view in absolutely everything they do and consider their environmental impact in the choices that they make every single day. So this is the new factory, just a glimpse. It started on site in the autumn, just before Christmas, and they've been struggling with snow this year. They've had a very, very cold winter in Norway, so I think it's slightly behind, but it's a real glimmer of hope for us. We're building this as the world's most environmentally friendly furniture factory, and it will be a first certainly in Norway. It's been designed, for those of you who are into architects, by Bjarke Group in Copenhagen. And it's set in the middle of a forest in Magnor, which is just on the Norwegian-Swedish border, about an hour or so's drive out of Oslo. And the project is what we call Paris Proof. That was the 2015 United Nations Paris Agreement, where all of the countries that signed up agreed to try and reduce their emissions by at least 40%. This will reduce our overall emissions by at least 50% compared to a similar conventional new factory. And it's the first industrial project in the Nordics that will meet the very toughest BREEAM outstanding level. That's the Building Research Establishment's environmental assessment method. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, that's absolutely fine. But it's an extremely high level to meet for architects and designers and the contractors when building houses or commercial properties, to tick every box and meet very demanding levels of sustainability. And we hope to bridge the gap between climate and nature, while also creating new jobs, and demonstrate that you can do both in a truly sustainable way. And we want to prove to the world that that's absolutely possible. We also want to invite in visitors. This is the visitor centre shown here in the heart of the factory. And we want to encourage children to see manufacturing as an exciting new career, which it currently really isn't. We want to encourage others to come and see how we do things and see how they can strike a better balance. We'll be completely open, and you'd be very welcome. We hope next summer it'll be open and fully functioning, to come and camp in the woods or just have a factory tour. So we're going to take advantage of groundbreaking Industry 4.0 solutions. So we will be filled with self-teaching robots, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, big data, driverless forklifts, etc. It's very much like an Amazon distribution depot, if you like. And as I mentioned before, our energy consumption will reduce by 90%, and our water consumption, 90% of that will be reused. And we think that this may well be the first fully closed loop furniture factory with this dedicated line to handle restoration and refurbishment, as I mentioned, and that will support our Vision Zero. So instead of clogging up what we're doing on the factory line with these repairs coming back in, we have a completely separate dedicated area for that. And it has been commented on that it looks a little bit like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I think people are sort of expecting Oompa Loompas to appear at any moment. But my CEO absolutely loves it. You know, the bright colours and the open sort of transparency are all part of the design. And as I mentioned, if you're keen to come and camp, we have a big forest area surrounding the factory that will be completely protected from future development. And it's going to be a stunning setting with children's play areas and a sculpture trail. And the architecture is great too, using somebody like Big. It means that, you know, it's set in its setting really neatly. The whole intention is to be completely transparent and democratic in terms of the architecture and the building, as well as our internal views on life. So we're using locally sourced materials, and the few trees that had to be chopped down have actually been reused and charred to clad the building. There will be no fences or closed off areas. So anybody who visits can come and look at the manufacturing whenever they like, get on the roof terrace, camp in the forest, all of these things that are considered quite normal in Scandinavia, but definitely less so here. So I hope that's given you some hope for the future. We've got about 5 minutes, I think, if there are any questions remaining. And I hope it's also given you a broader perspective of what sustainability might mean and inspired you to think differently about modern businesses, creativity in manufacturing, and the impact that we can all have on this really important area. And please remember, we can all save the world a little. Thank you.
Thank you, Romy. That was really interesting to hear about Vestra's positive intent about sustainability, and having that as a pillar of their vision. It really trickles down and forms the basis of everything that the company is doing, and affects the wider community as well. It's really inspiring. It, you know, encourages everyone to self-reflect and think about what is possible and what you can do. It's such a comforting and hopeful notion, that idea of you don't have to do everything, but everyone can do something. That's so great. We do have a couple of messages come through. So touring is vital for musicians and other performers and artists. And how do you think, you know, an individual can think about that in a sustainable way? You may not have all the answers, of course, but just something
don't
to
have
think
all the
about.
Answers.
And then there's another question. With the recent reports of the alarming carbon footprint caused by cloud storage, hang on, let me just scroll down. As so many creatives and freelancers rely on these platforms for digital content. And what are your thoughts on this, and what would you consider or suggest to be a more sustainable way to go about this kind of way of working?
Yeah, I definitely don't have all the answers. I'm no sort of tech expert in areas like that, but I'll do my best. So touring, I think it's obvious. I mean, you know, you always sort of say use public transport if you can. That's probably not viable if you're lugging around speakers and God knows what, you know, but look to at least initially hybrid or electric vehicles if you possibly can. I know they're more expensive. I know the infrastructure here is not great. Norway is leading the world in terms of electric vehicles, partly because it's a wealthy country and, you know, they have the provisions for what they need to do. But they've also put in a really good infrastructure of charging bollards and that network that you need. So there are real challenges. I've just got a hybrid car and I would love to have got an electric one, but it just wasn't viable for the sort of traveling I need to do. So I think, again, just do what you can. You know, none of us is perfect, in all honesty. We're, you know, should I really even have a car? But actually I can't do my job. I can't, you know, do the sort of hopefully good things through my role that I need to do without a car. So it's tricky, but I think just thinking about your impact, thinking about how you can do better. For starters, you know, it may be that it's small incremental moves that make that difference, but I would say sort of start in those places and see if you can, you know, just if there are a number of you, go in one car or go in one vehicle, you know, don't all of you head off. It's just minimizing our impact in absolutely everything, I think. And it's quite interesting because my professional body, the Landscape Institute, the last awards we had in person, which was the end of 2019, it was a big awards event, big dinner, all the usual stuff. And we didn't actually even really give customers that we took there an option. The menu was automatically vegetarian or vegan, and you had to actually opt in to have chicken. You know, and beef wasn't on the menu at all. And that was really interesting because it was extremely well received. So it's just flipping that sort of automatic thought of how you do things and say, well, no, why can't it be this way? You know, instead of everybody expecting to get, you know, a lump of beef on their plate, which is the worst thing you could possibly do. So thinking differently. And when it comes to cloud, and the servers, yes, I do believe there are more ethical suppliers, so it's worth looking for those. And I think, you know, also obviously in connection with that, your own electricity or gas or whatever you're using at home, you can find more ethical suppliers. So, you know, start with that as well. And I heard about 2 years ago, I think, a note that there was somebody had calculated that every single Google search you carry out uses the equivalent energy of boiling 2 kettles of water, which I had never stopped to even think about before. And when you do think about it, it's horrifying. But I think in everything, people are being encouraged, you know, don't send that thank you email in a sort of ping pong thing. You know, even that, think about how many emails you send. Think about, do you really need to carry out all those searches? Because I think most of us just do it unthinkingly every day, to be fair, without any idea that there's an impact.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, I think you've got to sort of start thinking about it in that way. And again, just minimizing what you can, where you can, and work at it, you know, in a manner that you can at least carry on with. That don't go too deeply into things and then, you know, find it just doesn't work for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I know that there is an alternative search platform actually to Google called Ecosia. And I think for every search, they claim that they plant a tree.
Exactly.
My son's got me onto that one at home, and I am all for sending less emails.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, it cuts across everything, doesn't it, in exactly that way? No, you're right. I couldn't remember the name of it. So there are options out there. There are choices we can make in ways like that. You know, there are, I think it's called Fairphone. You know, you don't have to have the most recent brand new iPhone. There are these phones that you can switch the camera for an upgraded camera element, but not all of it. So it's just thinking about our consumerism, I think, in every single way and everything that we do, and questioning, do we really need to do it like that, even if that's the way we've always done it? Because really, we can't keep doing what we've always done now. It's you know, it's requiring quite a big step change pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah. And not about feeling guilty, but just trying to be more curious and proactive about what we are doing.
Exactly. I think guilt's just completely pointless. You know, we are where we are, but we can all do better now. So yeah, definitely make it positive.